I got a little note here. This one I have to read out to you all. So the book today that we're going to talk about is quite short. And then if I tell you the name of the book, you know what is happening already. So I can't tell you the name yet. But this author, he is a surgeon. Alright? He do operation for people. And you might ask, why would a doctor write a book? Oh, to earn more. That is usually usually they say they want to earn more. But then if you go deeper, you start to realize this doctor is not just a normal doctor in the hospital. He's also the advisor of WHO. He's also the consultant of WHO. And then for many other hospitals in the world. So what happened is, this author implemented a series of actions throughout a few hospitals. And most of the hospitals, after implementation, the result was the same, which means complication cases in the hospital dropped by 40%. Complication meaning infections and things like that. After infections, after surgery, death dropped by 50%. And then complication and infection dropped 50%. Oral secretion. What is oral secretion? Oral secretion means you lie on the bed and then your saliva comes out to your mouth and then you get choked. Right? You get choked. That is called oral secretion. So that oral secretion dropped from 70% down to 4%. What do you think this author have done? And the best part is, zero cost. You don't really need more manpower to do any of this. And then you can get this type of result. So when I look back at the results, does it comply to anti-fragile? Does it comply to exponential? That means you do little bit things. The result is a lot. Right? Like death rate dropped by 50%. Imagine if that hospital's death rate is 5,000. That means if the death rate is 100% at that time, 5,000 people go in, right? 50% of it will die before implementation. So that is the surgeon itself. So this author is called Atul Gawande. Right? Yeah. Atul. Atul Gawande.
Oh,
So the name of the book is actually called
Nigeria. Is it Nigeria?
I can't remember. The name of the book is called Checklist Manifesto. So this is the thing that he implemented. He went into a hospital, he implemented checklist. And then, just now the result, complication, death rate, infection, all dropped by 50%. Oral secretion dropped from 70% down to 4%. So what is happening? Why is all these things happening? Why is the death rate still so high? Right? Or why did this author want to write a book about checklists? What is so important about checklists? And then they start to realize, in today's world, because we got so much knowledge, there is so many processes that we need to do. For example, in the engineering company, you want to build a bridge, you want to build a building. How do you know whether this building won't collapse? There is so many things to do, right? Or if you are going to fly a plane, in this case A380, you can easily carry up to 300, 400 or 500 passengers. How do you know whether you will drive this plane according the right way? That means you execute every step. Or when you drive to work, how do you know whether you can remember every step? Most of the time we skip a lot of steps. For example, when I was taught driving, the first thing I do is have to check the side mirror, then the rear wheel mirror. But these days when I drive, the first thing I do is nothing to do with the mirrors. Just connect my phone to the car. So I skip 2 steps already. What happens is, because today's world, because information is too much, sometimes we forgot to do something. We forgot to do something and it might cause a lot of complication. So this is also one of the main reasons why the author, in this case the surgeon, decided to write a book about checklists. Now the statistics here is quite scary. The study have only been done in 2001. Studies, research started only in 2001. So what year are we in now? We're in 2020. So the research has started almost 20 years ago. When the research started, which means checklists in hospitals is not mandatory yet. So when is checklist mandatory? When checklist was only mandatory in 2010. 2009 they released a report to the medical community, and then it's only in 2010 when they said that it is mandatory to come up with a checklist. So why do they need to make it mandatory? Because whenever a surgeon wants to go in for operation, usually there's a 5-step process. Wash your hand with soap. Second, wear a glove. Wear a glove, gown, cap. And then when you want to do operation, sterilize the location where you want to cut. Right? Or before that, sterilize the knife that you want to cut. So all these steps, they realize, usually doctors miss 2. Either forgot to wash the hand, forgot to sterilize the body, or forgot to sterilize the knife. So that is the reason why infection rate goes up. That is also the reason why when you watch TV now, checklist is always there. So the medical industry only started checklist in 2010. Yeah. And before they want to implement it, a lot of the doctors says, don't need. I am a specialist. I know what to do. But 30% of the doctors miss 2, easily 1 or 2 steps. Washing hands only. They forgot. So after operation, you have complications. When you have complications, you have to stay longer in the hospital. And then just now we mentioned about oral secretion. The saliva keep coming out to the mouth and then you choke. And then when you choke, the whole department have to come. The nurse, the doctor have to come. They have to see what's the problem. They have to remove the liquid. So that's complication as well. What happened? What did they implement? So to prevent oral secretion from 70%, the result dropped down to only 4%. What they did was the bed, they tilted up 30 degrees. And then it solved almost 90% of the problems. Simple things like this. So the medical industry only started their checklist in 2010. And let's show you something surprising is the airline industry actually started checklists in 1930s. 1930s, such a long time ago, but it was not implemented in the medical industry. What about project? Building a bridge. Same thing, we have checklists, but different name. We call it project timeline. That the whole department would check it on a daily basis or weekly basis. So construction, you guys have your own checklist. Airlines, you guys have your own checklist. So the author wants to share the importance of checklists. He's basically asking everyone, telling everyone that you can actually use checklists in every industry, even in the finance industry. But before you use checklists, you need to understand there is 3 types of problem. Simple problem, complicated and complex. What is simple problem? Simple problem is like, I want to bake a cake. How many sugar? How many grams of sugar? How many grams of flour? Right? How many grams of chocolate chips? Mix it together, how long? So I got a specific step 1, step 2, step 3. So that is simple problem. Complicated problems? Complicated problem is you want to send a rocket to the moon. Very complicated. Means you have a lot of moving parts. But even though it's complicated, even though you see a lot of moving parts, but you can see the cause and effect. Meaning, if you want it to fly, you need an engine. If the engine is not working, there must be a problem. So what is the problem? Maybe the bolt is not there. Maybe there's no petrol. So there is a cause and effect. Complicated problems, there's always a cause and effect. Like cars. Cars is a complicated problem. You want to build a car, or when you're driving, your car is shaking. What is the reason? Usually it's because you can easily find the cause and effect. Maybe your tire is inflated or overinflated, right? So there's a cause and effect. But for complex problem, whatever input you do, you will not see the output. So what is a complex problem? Complex problem previously we mentioned about is like educating your kids, right? Previously we talked about the knowledge, intellectual tourism, right? You think that you want to be a good parent, you teach your kids maths, science, different languages, all the language you teach, but then you realize your kids didn't reach your expectation, but you think that you as a parent, you already done your best. So educating your kids is a complex problem, right? So you can't see the cause and effect. So it is up to you to determine simple, complicated, and complex problem, what you need to do, whether you want to use the checklist or not. So there's two types of checklists. Do confirm. What is do confirm? We are quite familiar with this do confirm because we always see it in the movies. For example, I'll give you an example. Let's say in a plane, you got a co-pilot, you got a pilot, and then you got a co-pilot. And then one of the engine fail. When one of the engine fail, usually what will happen is the pilot goal is to turn off the engine and then restart the engine. Okay? So what the pilot will do is, pilot will first thing will say, engine failure, right? Pull out the engine failure checklist. Once you pull it out, then the first thing on the checklist, they have to read it out. This is true story. First thing on the checklist, fly the plane. So the co-pilot will have to read the checklist to the pilot. The co-pilot will say, fly the plane. The pilot will say, fly the plane, check. Why do you do that? Huh? To confirm. To confirm to fly the plane, because based on history, there are a lot of times when engine failure, both co-pilot and pilot forgot to fly the plane. They just keep checking the gauges. What is happening? What is happening? And then suddenly, boom, the plane crashed. So the first thing on the checklist, fly the plane. Then the second thing on the checklist, the first thing, fly the plane. Then after that, second, the co-pilot have to continue reading. Restart engine, or turn off the engine. Then the pilot will then turn off the engine. Check. The co-pilot will then move on to the third step, the fourth step. So you do, you confirm. You do, you confirm. Okay? So the other one is read, do. Read, do is based on your memory. So you have a checklist. For example, you wanna drive, you have a checklist. Okay? So you go into the car, you start driving. Before you start driving, you do all the adjustments, necessary adjustments. Then you look at the checklist, and then you confirm. So you read do, right? What happens is, eventually, everything is based on memory. Okay? So there are two types of checklists here. A very simple book that can easily be used into every industry. Finance, and then the medical industry, now we understand that it's quite common. The airline industry, so construction is the same thing. So at the end of the day, we need to understand there are three types of problems. We identify three types of problems, and then we decide the problems that we are going through, whether do we want to make a checklist out of it.